Good evening. I'm your host, Doug McDougall. As artists, we are called to be a voice for change in this world. Acclaimed Black author Toni Morrison saw it as a call to action. This is precisely the time when artists go to work. There is no time for despair, no place for self-pity, no need for silence, no room for fear. We speak, we write, we do language. That is how civilizations heal. And as such, I welcome you to a very special edition of Weekly Update. On this, the 19th of June, also known as Juneteenth, the observance of the day in history that Black slaves were freed in the United States of America. The day is also sometimes called Freedom Day or Emancipation Day. On this day in 1865, enslaved African Americans in Galveston, Texas, were told they were free and that the Civil War had ended. Now, 155 years later, people across the U.S. mark the observance with celebrations. This year's celebration may resonate in new ways, given the sweeping changes and widespread protests across the U.S. in these past few weeks and months. To quote the iconic Toni Morrison once again, "I know the world is bruised and bleeding. And though it is important not to ignore its pain, it's also critical to refuse to succumb to its malevolence. Like failure, chaos contains information that can lead to knowledge, even wisdom, like art." Following the filmed killing of George Floyd, a 46-year-old African-American man who died in the custody of the Minneapolis police last month, thousands of people around the U.S., and around the world for that matter, have poured onto the streets in solidarity and in protest. George Floyd's name, as well as the names of Breonna Taylor, Rayshard Brooks, and countless others, have become rallying cries for change across the country and around the world. Many Black Americans feel as though this is the first time in a long time that they have really been heard in a meaningful way. Juneteenth is an opportunity for people to learn from and reflect upon Black history in the U.S. and around the world. During a 10-year span, freedom fighter Harriet Tubman, perhaps the most well-known of all the Underground Railroad's conductors, made an astounding 19 trips and escorted over 300 slaves to freedom, never losing a single passenger, on the arduous trek from the Deep South to my home country here in Canada. She rightly proclaimed, "Every great dream begins with a dreamer. Always remember, you have within you the strength, the patience, and the passion to reach for the stars, to change the world." Fast forward 100 years to the Civil Rights Movement. In the 60s, when I grew up as a child, the fight for economic, social, and political justice for Black Americans. Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. gave countless Black people a voice and hope for the future in his famous speech delivered at the foot of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. on August 28, 1963, in front of 250,000 people on the ground and millions on TV around the globe. In this, the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of the U.S., he spoke of the struggle in America despite the Emancipation Proclamation, a momentous decree that came as a great beacon light of hope to millions of Black slaves, a joyous daybreak to end the long night of captivity. He went on to describe the current plight of Black Americans dealing with police brutality, segregation, discrimination, and poverty in the midst of a vast ocean of material prosperity. Harkening back to the Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, Dr. King spoke of the promise that all men, yes, Black men as well as white men, would be guaranteed the unalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. He said that it was time to make real the promises of democracy, ensuring the riches of freedom and the security of justice for all of God's children. Martin Luther King's dream for the future, deeply rooted in his personal faith and the American dream, was that one day the U.S. would rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed, that all men are created equal. That his 4 little children at home would one day live in a nation where they would not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. With this faith, Americans would be able to work together, pray together, struggle together, stand up for freedom together, knowing that we would be free one day, looking forward to the day when all of God's children, black and white, Jews and Gentiles, Protestants and Catholics, would be able to join hands in solidarity as human beings, God's creation. No truer words were spoken when Dr. King also warned that our lives begin to end the day we become silent about things that matter. Harriet Tubman and Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. were the first of many freedom fighters over the years, but many others have lent their voice to speak up and speak out about bullying, discrimination, and racial and social injustice. In 2009, a full 146 years after the Emancipation Declaration, Democrat Barack Obama became the first African-American president of the U.S. During his administration, he challenged Americans to create a new normal, one that is fairer and gives everybody opportunity and treats everyone equally and builds bridges between people instead of walls to divide them. During his presidential campaign, President Obama warned us that change will not come if we wait for some other person or if we wait for some other time. We are the ones we've been waiting for. We are the change that we seek.